Okay, so we were talking about adjustment versus layer adjustment. And just to do a basic adjustment to give this image more overall contrast and oomph and a sense of excitement, I can tell it's a little flat. Flat means the tonality is a little bit non-distinct, and it tends to be a little soft and not punchy enough. So that would look like this. It would look like image would look like image adjustments, not layer, rather image adjustments, levels. And when I bring up the levels dialog box, I have this map of the actual data of the image, and this is called the histogram, Histogram. And this histogram is showing me that I don't have very much shadow detail at all. I have some highlight detail, but it's sort of piecey. It's only stuck on the end there. And most of the data is in the center where that heap is. So that heap or that curve is most of the data. So if I start sliding my shadow slider into where the data begins, and I take my highlight slider and I slide it over to where this heap begins, I should already start seeing a lot more punch in the image. You see the difference? So the tones are much more distinct. I have stronger shadows and stronger highlights. The slider in the center here is actually your midtones. So if I wanted the midtones to be darker, I would slide it towards the white triangle. If I want the midtones to be lighter, I would slide it towards the dark. So I'm increasing the space between the highlight and the midtone here to increase the highlight detail. And if I change it this way, I'm increasing the space between the shadow and the midtone to increase the shadow detail. And I want it somewhere in the middle here, like that. So that's a permanent adjustment if I click OK. Now, I think I might have shown you something last week where I gave it away, the answer to this question that I'm going to ask you. Does anybody know what a way I can keep this image like the original one and have this one in the same file? Do you guys remember this from last week at all? It's okay if you don't. I just thought maybe someone would remember. History is a good choice, but that wasn't what I was going for through, although that's a great choice. There you go. So I'm going to actually undo my setting, and then I'm going to go layer 1 and bring it down here and duplicate it so I have two of the same. This is another way of keeping a non-destroyed or non-altered image in my document, and then I would go Command L or image adjustments levels, and then I could see what happens if I really crank this up to where the stack is. Now that's some decent contrast on that image. It's much more punchy. One could preclude it's a little bit got too much shadow there. One could argue that, in which case we could just back it off like that. Now on my monitor it looks great. It does look a little different here. It looks a little bit more, a little ever so slightly lighter, but here it's just got a good depth on it. I would turn it around, except I'm afraid of disconnecting the HDMI cord. And so then I can compare and contrast, which is something you might want to consider doing. You can see your before and after. So if you don't already have a photo, open one up. Doesn't really matter what the photo is, you're still going to get the same lesson out of it. Just checking on you. You okay? So a photo, if you don't have one, I would suggest you open one. Duplicate the layer by dragging it onto the new layer icon, and that will duplicate it. I'm going to pause. Right, in this next part of the project, I'm going to show you how to use an adjustment layer, and the difference between the two will become quite obvious. So I'm going to select and then trash my stairs layer and click yes. By deleting that, I've now resumed the file in its original integrity, just one layer. And then I'm going to show you how to add an adjustment layer. An adjustment layer is added down here on the panel, the layers panel itself. This little thing that looks like a little chocolate and vanilla cookie, if you click on that this little chocolate and vanilla cookie here, which I really wish I had right now. I really do. I'm going to click on levels. Boom. And now what I get is, notice, you do recognize that histogram, right? And when I make my adjustment choices here by doing my slider sliding, I now see something else has happened, and that is there is a new layery looking thing here added to my file. That is the adjustment layer. It's a type of a mask, and I can show you some really far out ways of using that when we talk about layer masking. But what this is doing is it's putting a proxy adjustment on the image. And when you're happy with it, you simply click away, meaning down here in the layers panel where there's nothing to click on. So as you may have guessed, the advantage of that is that if I want to adjust it again, please look up for Seki, is I'll click on this part that looks like the levels themselves, not on this rectangle, but rather here on the levels part. And then I could make my adjustment different. Okay, let's say I liked that. And again, to close that, you can either click on these double arrows or down here. So this is infinitely editable until you collapse this into the rest of the layers. So you can close and open and it'll still be there. It is a non-permanent, otherwise known as a non-destructive edit. Now, in terms of the choices that you have, as I mentioned earlier in this part of the lesson, is as far as adjustments go, there is a freaking lot of them. And you have to make sure you're on the right layer, otherwise you can't make an adjustment. And levels was one, there's curves, which is similar to levels, just uses a different interface, and exposure is also similar. That's why these are all, and brightness and contrast, which is why these are all in the same grouping. These are all tonality adjustments. Tonality adjustments. One could argue that some of these others are tonality adjustments too, but really in Photoshop, they're not really considered tonality adjustments. The next section down are color adjustments, vibrance, hue, saturation, color balance. Even black and white is considered a color adjustment because, well, it's removing color. There's photo filters, channel mixers. This stuff is crazy, channel mixers. We may or may not have a chance ever to get to that in this class. And then there's color lookup, or adjusting by specific color values. And then we have special effects, inverting, posterizing, thresholding, gradient mapping, one of my favorites, selective color. This is a very interesting setting. I'll show you that one in a bit. Or we've got shadow and highlight controls, including shadow and highlights, and HDR, high dynamic range. HDR stands for high dynamic range toning. And then we have selective color or specialty color adjustments. Desaturate, removing color from color. Match color, trying to match a specific numeric value. Replace color, finding a color and putting another color in. And equalize. And just for fun, I'm going to use replace color. And again, I'm going to not do it as an adjustment, but rather as an adjustment layer. So I'm going to click on this layer, and I'm going to come down to the cookie, and then I'm going to find that one. It's towards the bottom here, and it is selective color or replace color. It is not showing me that one here. Okay, so I don't have that one. Not every single one is in regular adjustments exists inside of adjustment layers, which is sad, but it is true. I can try to do it with selective color. And what this does is it opens up a menu which allows me to select the color I want to change. And I'm going to change yellows because it's very obvious in my image where the yellows are. And what should be happening is I'm changing yellows and making them warmer by adding cyan, and now they're turning to orange. If I remove yellow from yellow, I'm not going to see a whole lot happen there. It just kind of makes a duller orange. But if I remove cyan from yellow, it'll pump up the orange. Once you set that, you can click on the absolute button down here. You can see that most times absolute will be a much stronger adjustment, whereas relative is a color relative to another color, often more subtle. You can see the difference. And then when you like what you have, click away, and then notice that you can hide and show these adjustments separately. And again, that's another powerful aspect of working with adjustment layers, that you can increase or decrease the way in which they are affecting your image. One more thing and then I'll be quiet for a moment at least. And that is, if you select one of your adjustment layers, such as levels, you can downplay it by reducing the number of the opacity value, the value of the opacity. And now I will let you play for a good solid 2 minutes.
Just say once again about the opacity.
Select the layer.
Right.
Here's the opacity setting.
Right.
See it there?
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm going to give you 3 minutes on this. I'm feeling generous.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go ahead and stop that recording.